Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting live from our Sanctum Sanctorum in Venice, California. This is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael, and today we welcome back to the show the amazing Amanda Woomer. And you have met her before. She runs the website Spook Eats, and it's about travel and investigating paranormal activity at restaurants and bars. And then she created the incredible journal, the Feminine Macabre. So we're going to talk about the most recent release, which is Volume 3. She does so much. She lectures. She's an author herself. She's a mother. So we're so happy to have her back and can't wait to get started. But Michael has a few announcements.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for tuning in again. And yes, we love having Amanda here. And then next week, we have witchcraft practitioner Renee Starr, another of our great friends who's going to be visiting. So all you guys are into the pagan magical world, please join us for that. You can get all the information on our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SIXTH, all spelled out. One of the best things you can do for us, of course, is hit like and subscribe, and it really does help us to keep the show growing, which is really nice. If you're on the website and you can afford to, buy us a coffee on Ko-Fi. It helps us to put money into upgrading our equipment a little bit and paying some of our production costs. So, and if you can't afford it, we love you anyway, and keep tuning in. We love having our viewers and your audience. You guys are fabulous. We just really love all of you. So with that, I'm not going to take up too much more time because there's just so much to cover today with Amanda. So take it away, Krista.
Great. Thanks, Michael. And welcome back to the show, Amanda.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be back for a third time.
I know. Isn't it great?
It's crazy.
Michael's the one that found you. He was looking on. Yeah, we were looking for possible guests, and he's like, she looks really cool. I like her website, Spook Eats, and of course, you responded to the invitation, which is always wonderful because that doesn't always happen.
Oh, boo.
I know. Well, one reason I found out was one person that came on the show a year after I'd written to her. She just didn't see her message. And she finally responded, "Oh my God, I'd love to come on." And I was like, sure. So you can't take it personally. So let's catch up a little bit with what you've been up to since the last time you came on the show. Is there anything particular that sticks in your mind that you personally have been doing as an investigator? Anything at all?
So basically, I've just been working on my own book. That's not the Feminine Macabre. That's taken a while because I've been so focused on the Feminine Macabre. So I've been working on that. Just yesterday, it was announced finally that I am going to officially be joining the paranormal basically travel company, Ghosts and That Paranormal Adventures. It's based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I've done a couple events with them in the past, and I just really respect the work that they're doing, how they run their events. They're fun, but they're also very respectful of the history and the location, very educational. So I am joining their company, and I am heading the Buffalo chapter. So if anyone in the Western New York area does any Ghosts in That events, I will be your fearless leader. So get ready for that.
That's awesome. So what is the book that you're working on? I think you've brought it up before, but I've forgotten.
So I have two that I'm working on, but the one that I'm like plowing ahead with, it's the working title right now is Harlots and Hauntings. Ooh. And basically I'm looking at the history of prostitution and then looking at haunted locations, particularly hotels, bars, and restaurants that are haunted by the spirits of prostitutes, and how us telling their stories and saying their names have kind of given them eternal life in a way. And that even though they should have been these nameless women and just blips throughout history, we're remembering them and we're talking about them. And because of that, in a way, they're famous and they're immortal. So it's been really fun to kind of celebrate an unusual side of feminine dark history that I don't think a lot of people feel comfortable enough to talk about. So it's been fun to kind of shine a light on that. And I'm hoping to get that done in time for the Haunted America conference in June. So.
Oh, that's soon too. Yes, I noticed that you are a speaker there, and it seems, from what I can tell, it's somewhat a prestigious thing. It doesn't seem like they have a lot of speakers, and they've been around for a little while. Is that correct?
Yeah. So Haunted America, it's in Elton, Illinois, and they're celebrating their 25th anniversary this year. So I think that they're officially the oldest Paracon in the country. It's run by Troy Taylor, who's a researcher and an author that I really, really admire. He's definitely kind of been one of my advisors in a way, or go-to guys that I've kind of bounced ideas off of being kind of more of a novice writer myself. And I'm super excited to be a part of it. I really, again, respect the work that Troy's doing, and it's really about the research that people are doing within this field, and not about, the flashiness or, the biggest names in the industry necessarily, but it's really about the work that people are doing. So I'm excited to be able to go there, share some of the research that I've been working on, as well as learning from other people as well. So if anyone's in the area, June 24th and 25th is Haunted America. Woo.
That sounds wonderful. I wanted to also, though, pick up on the idea. I don't really think you're a novice writer. I mean, in that you have published how many other books yourself? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at least?
At least.
And
yes. I think
articles
the prostitution book is technically number 10 if you're including the Feminine Macabre, which I just edited
yes.
and stuff. But
so I don't, that's interesting. You perceive yourself. I think it's good to have that idea of a beginner's mind, that Zen concept of every book is sort of new beginning in a sense, but I would certainly not consider you personally a novice writer.
Oh, thanks. But compared to other people who have been around for decades, I've only been writing since 2019. So, or publishing books and stuff. I've been writing since I was 12, not necessarily well.
Well, now that's an interesting thing that I have been thinking about. And I think that based on my own feeling about writing. Also, I remember something that Clarissa Pincoliesti said about artists in general. If you paint a picture, if you write, you are that artist. And I think the dismissiveness, maybe it's a little more with writers, because I do think writers they have particular battles that other artists don't have as much. First of all, very few become well known. I mean, think of even screenwriters that do incredible movies. I couldn't even name hardly any screenwriters unless it's a personal friend of mine that I know wrote a play. That's kind of cheating, right? So the fact that you were writing before that, it does count, because some people really don't start writing until like 40, and then that's their beginning. They said, I haven't really written anything except what I had to do in high school or whatever. So all of that does count. Even if it's not put together into a polished form, because it's basically prepping you to be a writer. It counts.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
So let's talk a little bit about Volume 3. I wanted to ask you, I can't pronounce her name, Bridget
Marquardt?
Marquardt.
I think that's how you say it. I feel bad because I've only ever read it.
I really enjoyed her foreword and also her background. I don't know a lot of people in the paranormal at all, except because of you and Mystic Mittens and Craig Owens. I've started to learn some of the people that are in the paranormal, because I was more in the metaphysical side of things for many years. But I really enjoyed it, and I was wondering how you go about picking or asking people for your forewords in all the different volumes.
So basically, Patty Negri, she wrote our very first volume, and I actually just had a conversation with her earlier today. We recorded a show, and I thanked her personally, face to face for the first time, just to say thank you for writing the foreword for Volume 1. You didn't know what it would be like. There was nothing to base your opinions off of. It was a total leap of faith for her. So for me, what I like to do is I like to try to find a variety of people. And unfortunately, we are such a small publication that you do reach out to some of the bigger named people, and they either never get back to you, or they're not interested, or they're unavailable at the time. So, you do kind of have to work with the people that are willing to work with you. And that just, the ladies that have been willing to write our forwards, they just have a very special place in my heart, because even though they're all famous of varying degrees, they still take time for like the little people to help us out as well. So Patty Negri wrote volume 1, Michelle Bellinger wrote volume 2, and Bridget Marquardt wrote volume 3. And while they're all involved in the paranormal and the occult and the metaphysical, they're all in different areas. Patty is a witch and a psychic medium. Michelle is definitely more the psychic medium area, doesn't really dabble so much in the witchcraft end of things, but she is also intersex. So that was a huge piece of what she wrote about in her forward, and being part of a vastly, underrepresented group. And then Bridget, who is definitely more of the celebrity end of things. And I think people look at her, or they hear her name and they think of she's the Playboy bunny, she's the girl next door. But then you realize she studied parapsychology. She has a podcast called The Ghost Magnet. And so I like to try to find women who have different histories that have led them to this point in the paranormal. My hope in moving forward is to branch out a little bit more, to finding women that work more within witchcraft or voodoo, or even women of different ethnicities. All 3 of our ladies so far have been white, which I don't love. I love them all, but I wish that we could have more of a variety in that sense. So reaching out to various women and trying to explain, this is what we do, this is what we're looking for. I always keep my fingers crossed that we hear back from some, but sometimes we don't, sometimes we do. I'm hoping to get more into the death culture end of things, history, because all of those things are represented within the Feminine Macabre. But so far, we've really only had the paranormal end of things, where people are going on investigations. So I'm hoping to branch out a little bit more in the future. We do have volume 4's forward already locked in. So I'm excited. I'm not going to say anything though, but she definitely does a bit more of like the history end of things along with the paranormal. So I'm excited to kind of start branching out further and further, to get some people that, when people see, oh, forward by so-and-so, it makes them kind of stop and scratch their head. And maybe that's what will inspire them to pick up a copy.
It can, for sure. And I did want to sort of share with you our experience about wanting to have diversity on our show. And so I know that you don't necessarily go after particular people to write that, but anyone can submit, but we actually do try to cultivate that. And to be honest, I seem to be having a little trouble with African-American women coming on the show. I've had Latino women, African-American man. And I think, like, particularly from my experience, like trying to reach out to voodoo to someone who didn't know me, I think I'm going to have an in with somebody with the voodoo. And I kind of understand why that is. But it was something that I've noticed, because I reach out also just out of like, curiosity. I want not just politically, but just trying to find diversity is always interesting to me. But I find that there's that side of it that people might not know, that sometimes it can be, depending on who you are, if you don't know a certain group, they cannot want to interact. And also sometimes people just, I realize, I think I told you before the show, sometimes they don't see messages you send through like Facebook and stuff. Again, they don't check the ones that aren't friends. And that happened to me once with someone. Luckily, they eventually got back and they really wanted to be on the show. So I kind of just persist. And I try not to be stalker, but I'm like, oh, maybe I'll try again, and but it's something that I'm trying to, we want to do too as well, because we think it just makes sense for the kind of thing we want to put out there in the world.
Yeah. And I think, like, I agree 100% with you. And I feel like there is this, not a stereotype, but just the paranormal and the occult has always been presented as very white. Up until recently, I feel like it's been white men. And, the ladies managed to, bust through and get into that. But now it's let's bring in, the women of color, trans women, let's keep bringing them in. And when it comes to submissions for the Feminine Macabre, I don't seek people out because for me, that's not fair. I opened it up to submissions. So I'm only pulling from the pool that is sent to my inbox. But when it comes to the forward, I do have control over that.
Yeah.
So hearing you say that you just keep persisting, I think that I too will have to continue to just kind of poke at it every so often and continue to try to grow and learn and see who beyond my sphere of people that I follow and people that I know are fascinating and interesting and have something to contribute to the Feminine Macabre and to the community as a whole. Because again, with women within this community, I do think that for whatever reason, we're not highlighted nearly as much, and so to have the opportunity to try to amplify someone's voice and to share it with people that have never heard of this person or heard of the topic that they specialize in or the way that they think or their theories, that's the whole point of the Feminine Macabre. So I really want to try to take it seriously with finding the perfect forward writer for each volume moving forward.
I forget what I read one time when I was doing some more serious type political articles. It was some famous journalist, and he literally went to get this interview with someone 90 times to that person. I remember thinking like, oh my God, I didn't even know I could do that. And I thought, wow. And he finally it was like some big political figure, and it was a famous investigative journalist. And it just showed me like how you can really, kind of hound somebody, and it's okay to do that. And especially how you do it, I think, if you say, oh, I really, and so not, and I don't take it so personally, like I did, before, like, well, they don't like us,
Yeah.
And I said, well, now it's more like, I'll see if they'll, we like them, and that's what matters. And we're going to keep, after them. But I noticed that too. It just seems to be, and I don't really know the reason, to tell you the truth, because we've had other types of people on the show. So it is diverse, but we want to keep adding to the diversity.
Yeah.
So in volume 3, what do you think for you makes it a little more different from the other 2 volumes?
So for me, I do say in my introduction of the volume that I feel like volume 3 is full of surprises. Whereas I feel like volume 1 and volume 2 very much followed what people expected from a journal of all things strange and unusual. There were things within volume 3 that we've never had before, topics that have never been covered before. I mean, I think the fact that our foreword is written by a Playboy bunny is unusual and it's surprising. And when you look at Bridget, you don't think like you're a ghost hunter, but she knows her stuff. She's so knowledgeable and so educated in it. Some of the topics that we have are so interesting to me. We've got botany. One woman wrote about voodoo, which we've never had anything about voodoo before. Another woman wrote about astrology and how she tracks spirit communication with astrological charts. And for me, I don't understand astrology at all. I have tried, I can't do it. But when I read her essay, it took my breath away. And I've actually sent people who have recently lost loved ones to her essay. And I said, this will help you with your grief. So I think we have a lot of new authors that have never been part of the Feminine Macabre before. Our non-binary section is even bigger than it was last time. So I think we're continuing to grow and continuing to not just grow in size and in our numbers, but in the topics that we're willing to kind of explore and try to learn from. And as we continue to grow, I'm excited to see what number 4 has. Because again, like my specialty is the paranormal, hauntings. So whenever someone gives something outside of that, I get to learn something new, which I absolutely love. It's my favorite part about doing the Feminine Macabre. And when I get surprised, I know other people will get surprised as well. So volume 3 might be my favorite so far, just for the sheer diversity of the number of topics that we have.
Very true. And I did appreciate that article about astrology and spirit communication. And I do study astrology, and it was a really interesting, to me, I'd never heard it quite like that. I have a friend that's doing some kind of astrological charts with the dead people, but he's doing his own thing and he hasn't published anything yet. But he's the only one I know that even was doing something like that. And I found it viable, what she was saying. Like, I thought, yeah, that seems like that really could be worth investigating. So I thought it was quite innovative, her ideas, and I'd be interested to see it fleshed out even more at some point if she does a book or something. That would be cool.
Yeah. I hope that she does continue to explore this, because again, as a layman who doesn't understand what you're talking about, I was so touched by it, and it blew my mind. So the fact that you, as someone that does study astrology, kind of felt that, yeah, this she could be onto something, just kind of adds to the fact that I really think that there's something special about the work that Elaine is her name, Elaine de Bowen. I think that she's doing very important work and unusual work. I don't know of any paranormal investigator that really works with astrology to try to track spirit communication. And that's exactly what she's doing. And I think it's fascinating.
There's something a little similar, but through the tarot, and I haven't tried it yet, but is it Donald Tyson's book on tarot magic? He has a thing where you can create a connection to someone who died through this layout in the tarot that is based a little bit on building a temple and then the person's astrological chart, which I've always wanted to try, but I figured it might take a little bit of time. Like, you have to set it up a certain way. And again, that's kind of it's more aimed more to the tarot people. And yet it does use the chart itself to kind of, I guess, bring that person in, like, because yeah, that represents their soul, where no matter what. So that's the only other one I can kind of think of. But yeah, I think it's just really interesting to see where the evolution of trying to connect to the dead is going, because it seems like it's not only the technical, it seems like it's kind of blossoming in different ways.
Yeah. And I feel like more people are starting to use the term spirit communication. And I think that is the perfect definition of what we're trying to do. You're not hunting ghosts, like you're not killing anything. You're like, ghost hunting is it's a silly term. We use it. It's fine. I don't hate it. But you're really trying to communicate with something else. You're trying to communicate with a spirit. So, and I think, you see that evolution from planchette and automatic writing to the Ouija board. Now we have, pendulums and dowsing rods. And this is just another tool in the arsenal that people can start to use. If you're not into the gadgets and using, digital recorders for EVP, well, maybe you're into astrology and you can use these charts to kind of track the spirit communication, or using the tarot cards. So I think it's really cool that we're expanding our tools that we use for spirit communication. It doesn't have to be electronic. It doesn't have to be these gadgets. It can be something much more simpler. It can be something that people have been using for hundreds of years, and we're kind of going back to the roots. So I think it's cool. And again, I'm excited to kind of see where the next few years will take us in regards to the tools that we use for spirit communication.
I always wonder if it would get to the point, like, I think I've mentioned this in another show, that in the US chart, we have, I think it's the North Node in the 8th house, which is connected to the occult, the 8th house, one of the things. And the North Node is their evolution. So the evolutionary trend of a country, even though you want to also include the South Node. And Leo is kind of the creative, doing creative things. And then we also, I think, have Mercury, which is really interesting. So I feel like in the United States chart, and maybe someday I'll talk about it more on the show. I mentioned it a couple of times, I think, on my own show, but we have our own particular karma with the occult, metaphysics. And I do see it starting to blossom more, I feel like, just based on the popularity of shows, the different ways, like you're saying, that people are beginning to try to connect to spirit. It's all really interesting, but I always wonder if there's someday going to be something that will make things more visible, like some sort of apparatus where you can see more, literally.
Yeah. And I feel like if you look back to what we were using 50 years ago, we've come infinitely far with all of our tools and the gadgets and the technology with what we use to potentially communicate with the other side. So 50 years from now, we probably can't even imagine. If 50 years ago, people couldn't have imagined what we were going to have. So only time will tell. We'll see. But we'll probably be on the other side of things trying to communicate with the new gadgets. Come on.
Yeah, I wonder what happens when people that are really into paranormal investigation, when they die, if they try to come back more because they want to show the other side of it. That's an interesting idea.
Yeah. And that's actually a topic. Alex Matsuo from the Spooky Stuff, she talks about it in volume 3, the future of paranormal investigations. And she mentions a case study of where she was researching a residential case, and it was a home of a former paranormal investigator. And so when they were bringing out all of their equipment, they started the conversation with this spirit by saying, we know that this is what you used to do. I'm assuming you already know how all this stuff works. And they did get an intelligent response that said, yes, I do. Like, let's just keep going. Like, you don't have to give me the equipment 101 talk. I know how it works. So I do think it's very possible that if people choose to come back or choose to remain and try to communicate, that why not, try to help us prove what is, what isn't. And kind of have people working together on both sides to kind of prove what's waiting for us on the other side.
Collaboration.
Exactly.
I like that idea. Well, you have to wonder, I mean, at least I do. I have to wonder, what is the end game of it all? And is it only, which is enough, to prove that life exists after death? But is there something more, which Rudolf Steiner believes there's an evolutionary necessity to connect with our loved ones? And I don't quite understand sometimes what he's talking about. He's a difficult person for me anyway, sometimes to get, but he's the only one I've ever read that believes it's part of our, a mystical person I've ever read that believes that connecting to the dead, in particular our own loved ones, is important and is part of how we'll evolve as human beings. And I thought, well, then there's more to it than only proving it exists. Then we must be going to do something with it,
Yeah.
So.
No, and I think that, at least for me, like, the reason why I got into the paranormal was to connect with my brother. So I'm at least lining up with his theory 100%. Like, I always believed that there was life after death and that something happens, because I had some strange experiences growing up. But then once, I lost Jed, my brother, that was the passion just kind of overflowed. And that it was a desperate need to reconnect and just to kind of prove to myself that there was at least a piece of him still around, that maybe when I go, my piece and his piece can somehow come back together again. So I'm not going to argue with him on that. I do, at least for me, it's part of my evolutionary needs,
right.
If not everyone else's as well.
Well, that's exactly how we share that kind of in common. When my brother was lost at sea, that was really when I started very seriously and just investigating it all. And it was extremely painful and not something I would wish on anyone. And but it was really the thing that drove me in, and it kept me there too, because it was a strong enough thing. And I went through different ideas though about how I felt about his death. And I went through different versions of whether or not I felt it was he was ready to die or not. And I went through my own process over many, many years. Yeah. But I just think it's an interesting idea. If there is this evolution with the dead, what would it look like? How would that, if a person does believe in reincarnation, which not all spiritualists do, evidently. At least I know someone that doesn't believe in reincarnation, but they believe in life after death. But how would that affect it? I've often wondered, how does that affect where that person's going next? And what about time? And it's so really,
like, do they have to wait for you if you want to try to go to get, after my brother passed away, I had many a sleepless night where I have notebooks just filled with theories, ideas, questions of, if this is how it is, then how does this, and this happen? Or is it like this? Or is it like that? And I think the beautiful thing about it is we won't know until it's our turn. So, and that's kind of like tragic in a way, but also beautiful. So I don't know.
Yeah, and there's even contradictory ideas I've read. Like, I like to read stories of children that have come back and they remembered their past lives, and it's so amazing. And sometimes it seems like it was just a generation ago. And then I read this sort of funny thing where the little boy said to the parents something like, "I've been waiting 100 years to come back."
Oh my God.
I was like, I don't know. I was like so touched, and I thought, oh my goodness. And it was just something a little kid had said to their parents. And there was more to the story. Someone had published a whole thing on Facebook about it. But so there was like two different things. Like, okay, someone came back right away. Someone had to wait 100 years. How does that? But then perhaps time is different.
Yeah. And again, like that's a whole other can of worms that you have to try to wrap your mind around, but also don't bother because you're not going to figure it out. So just kind of go with the flow on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fascinating. And again, it's like a rabbit hole where you can just fall down it for, I was going to say days, I would say years. You're just thinking about these things, and like they'll strike you at the most random moments, and then you can't stop thinking about it and asking these questions and researching. And again, you'll never really find an answer. So it just drives me crazy.
It's true. And every now and then I have to take a break from it. So that's where I sort of read some literature for a while. But then in the literature, there's something about a ghost.
Right? Can't escape it.
It's everywhere. Oh, we lost you for a second there.
Sorry.
No worries. So one of the things I also wanted to talk about, which I think is really very special about what you're doing with the Feminine Macabre, is your intention to build a community. And it's very obvious to me. And then so you have, like, for the contributors, you have a special Facebook group that's where you can help each other out and get to know each other. I also noticed that from what I can see, many of the contributors are very good at supporting the Feminine Macabre in a very real way. It's, you can see they're really into it. Like they really, it isn't just, I'm doing this because I'm in it or something, and which is fine. But I really get the feeling of people wanting to build this sort of community. And I would say, I mean, it's the first time I've felt a little bit part of a movement, because I tend to be more of a loner in my older years, and I tend to feel okay about that. But I do feel that. And I think that's really interesting. I'd like you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So for me, I'm very similar to you, very much a loner. I don't have a paranormal team in any way. All of my research has been very solitary. And when you look into, especially the paranormal, everything out into just a vacuum and nothing comes back to you. So that was kind of one of the things that I wanted to try to establish within the Feminine Macabre, because I knew I wasn't the only one that's not part of a team. You don't really feel like you're connected to anyone. You're not really part of the community, but you desperately want to be. So the fact that the Feminine Macabre has created this little niche of a community within a community is so cool to me. And it's everything that I wanted when starting this. We just recently started the Facebook group for the contributors. And in my mind, I was like, why haven't we done this to begin with? So we can all interact with each other and share our projects. And, if people need advice or help with anything, like, we can give it. And it's just felt so genuine from so many people, the excitement that they have towards this, the passion that they have towards it. I have several ladies that are constantly sharing, promoting, posting about it, talking about it, whether or not they're in that specific volume. In every community, you have people who come in because they just want to, get published, they get their free copy, and then they skedaddle. Fine. That's you don't necessarily want to always connect with a community, and that's fine. But those that have, the passion has been so palpable. And I've had several ladies come to me and tell me that they've actually started real life friendships with other women. If they find, like, they live within the same state or they live near each other, they've met for coffee, they've gone on investigations with each other. So it's gone from just being a book of paper and ink to actual friendships of flesh and blood, which I just think is the coolest thing. It's I mean, it's the feminine macabre in motion and breathing and living life. And I feel like there's always this stereotype that women are catty and backstabbers and we don't get along with each other. And the fact that that has not been the case with the feminine macabre in any way, shape, or form is beautiful. People are supporting each other and uplifting one another, and not just the project, but each other as well. I always said, like, I take it very seriously being, the person that runs this show, the one that picks the articles and puts it together and runs the Instagram account and runs the Facebook page. It's a very big responsibility that I don't take lightly. And to see the effect that it's had on these researchers and these writers' lives, and the work that they're doing is so humbling and just so beautiful. Like, I've made friendships on the internet, but then also in real life that I would never have gotten if it wasn't for the Feminine Macabre. So I will forever be grateful for this little book series, whether it, stops at 4 volumes or it gets to 40 volumes or whatever. It's been a great little community, and I hope that we'll continue to support one another and lift each other up. I think that the Feminine Macabre community can be an example for all communities, not just within the paranormal or the occult or the metaphysical, but even beyond. So,
well, for me personally, I don't know why I haven't written more paranormal articles before, because I've written things and not published them, but there's something about the journal that I felt pulled into, and it really is a great thing that, especially that last article I wrote, I finally got it out of my head. I mean, I've been thinking about it for like 5 years, and it was just a relief. Like, oh my God! And even if you hadn't taken it, I would have been happy, because finally it made me put it together. And one of the things that I still think perhaps for some women is taking our work seriously. And I think what I like about the journal is you really get that sense that the work of all these different people is being taken seriously, and the writing. And at least for me, I was thinking about that, that I still think as a female woman writer, and even though I published articles and a couple of poetry books, it's still this part of me that doesn't quite take it seriously in terms of the putting it out there, and that there's this sort of invisible sexism I've sort of absorbed. And it's in me, but of course it's kind of taught through the culture, and not Michael at all. He's always so encouraging, but it's more, the culture of writing, and in all fields for women. So I think that is one reason I particularly find it important, because I don't know that there's any other, I mean, I don't know if there's many journals out there even that do that. There are some magazines I know, but I know certainly in the paranormal world, I don't think there's any other journal that promotes the women and the non-binary writers at all. At least I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, I know that there's one, I believe it's a magazine. I believe it's called Mystica Magicae. And it's a queer publication, and it really celebrates the LGBTQ community. That's the closest thing that I've seen. I could be wrong, and I would be happy if I was wrong. And I think, like, going back to what you said about, not necessarily taking, the idea of writing seriously. I did a great example of it just at the beginning of the show when I said, like, well, I was writing when I was younger, but that wasn't for real. Like, I was writing very passionately at 12, won awards and stuff for my writing. But again, didn't take it seriously because I'm a kid, got a lot of my fiction writing published, and then really starting as a nonfiction writer with the paranormal. That's when I did consider myself like the writing career beginning. And I think, like, with writing, it's so personal. It doesn't matter what you're writing about. You're pouring your heart and soul into whatever it is. It could be a movie review, for crying out loud, but you're putting your time and energy into it. And when you put it out into the world, there's a chance that people aren't going to like it. They're going to criticize it. They're going to rip it apart. And I think that's something that, at least for me, for the longest time, nobody ever read my writing. No one was allowed near it. As a way to protect myself from whatever it was that I was afraid of. And the main thing I always tell people that show an interest in submitting something to the journal, but they're afraid to, I always tell them, like, you've got nothing to lose. I am a safe place. If you're submitting to me, I'm not going to rip you apart. People have asked for feedback in the past and I've offered it. If they didn't get accepted and then they try again and then they get accepted the next time. So I always tell people, like, I'm a safe place. I'm a writer at my heart and soul, at the very core of my being. I'm a writer. So I get it. I get not wanting to share what you're writing. But there are times where what you're writing is exactly what people need to read. So it's up to you to take that leap of faith to bring it to the masses and to bring it to people that could really benefit from what you're thinking and feeling and researching. So anyone that's watching right now that is considering submitting for volume 4, I highly, highly encourage it. Like we said, it's a great community, and I really take it very seriously, like putting out a nice polished piece of work. It's not slapped together, it's edited. There's proofreading that goes into it. It's a beautiful cover by Emily Wayland. And it really is a beautiful finished product that you can be proud of. And to be able to say that you are a writer, and say it with confidence and with pride.
Yeah, and I think that that you really do cultivate the space of acceptance, and that's from knowing you over the what is it, a couple years now, and that you really do live that value, because it isn't true of all editors and it isn't true of all submissions. You would think it should be, because basically if I have a publication, I am looking for something that will really wow me as an editor or a publisher, like that really basically reflects on the journal or the magazine, right? Yeah. But I think you do cultivate that, and I think that's one of the strengths. I think, at least for me, I feel that way, and it makes me want to take a chance. And because, rejection, nobody likes rejection in a sense, but, it is part of anything being submitted, whether it's music or art, it's just part of the game, right? If you want to look at it that way. But there are people in the world, I think, that try to cultivate a more open and accepting, still wanting, really good work, but like you said, not ripping it apart and, feeling like wanting to make people feel bad and things like that.
Oh, gosh.
That I don't see how that's productive.
No, I was gonna say, I've been on the receiving end of that. And I learned, like, that's not helpful.
Yeah.
So
yeah, me as well, when I was younger, especially.
Yeah.
But I think that idea too, like I said, I think there's still in the culture this a little bit of stigma for the woman writer. I mean, you look at sometimes, like, how women have their own genre, which I don't really particularly like, women's fiction or
but what does that even mean?
I know well, you could say it about children's literature too. Like, there are some things that are children's books, like ABC, and then you have like
young adult literature where you're like, these are fun books. Yeah. I'm 32 years old and I like reading these.
Yeah. And it's so I know they need to do it on some level just to organize things, but it does make it a little more complicated when things are classified like that.
Yeah.
So, well, I wanted to talk also a little bit about not only the conference coming up, but that you seem to be, from what I can tell, a person that does lectures regularly as well on different topics. And how did that get started? And tell us a little bit about your experience as a lecturer.
Yeah, so when I published my first book, which was The Haunted Atlas of Western New York back in 2019, I reached out to different libraries and historical societies, because I knew that these places a lot of times like to have these sorts of events, especially around Halloween time, and especially a very localized, area specific topic was very popular. So that's just kind of what I started. I kind of just I was gonna say hit the pavement, but via email, and just started reaching out to libraries, schools, historical societies, and just suggested, here's the topic that I'm writing about. Are you interested? And, of course, out of the, 60 emails you send out, you only get back maybe a dozen. But that was kind of the start for me. I started lecturing on, the local haunted history here in Western New York. And from there, I've kind of expanded to women within the paranormal. I just did a sold out event at a local venue here in Western New York, all about, women in the paranormal. It included a copy of the Feminine Macabre that people could take home with them. And it got, really nice reception. I do a creepy Christmas lecture, one for kids, which focuses on the Christmas monsters like Krampus and, the Tom Tar and the Yule Cat, all of that fun stuff. And then I have an adult one that focuses more on the Victorian custom of telling ghost stories at Christmas time and why do we do this? And let's look at examples and things like that. So for me, what I love to do is really just sharing kind of that weird forgotten history. And you find that, I'm a weirdo. It's just obvious I'm a weirdo. If you look at me, like you just know right away, like she's going to talk about some weird stuff. Whereas you find that as soon as you start talking about these things, other people are just as interested, and they're hungry to learn about it and they want to know more. So I've really enjoyed being able to do that. Of course, during COVID, that made it really difficult. I was able to do several virtual events, but it's not the same at all as being in the room with people. So the last 6 months or so, I've been able to do several in-person events. And it's been nice to get back to it because I'm a history nerd. I love talking about these sorts of things. So to be able to share this information, especially the local history with people, is one of my favorite things about being a writer, is, you can put the book out there and you see that people buy it, but to actually be able to share the information face to face with people and hear their reactions and answer their questions, is one of my favorite parts of the whole Spookeats thing that I get to do.
That makes sense. I'm sure there's some interesting conversations that you have too as a result.
Oh yes, that's always, everyone has a ghost story to share. Everyone has to share their ghost stories at these events. And then they ask me if I know about this. And then they'll bring up a topic that I've never heard of before. And then 20 minutes later, you realize like, oh my gosh, like we need to get back on task here. Like I have to finish wrapping up all my stuff so I can go home. But it's so interesting to be able to swap information with people. Because again, I'm always looking to grow and learn something new, and other people are as well, which it's always fun when you get to connect over something like that.
Do you ever have someone that's initially very skeptical and then really turned on after they listen to whatever you're talking about? Or
yeah, so for me, like I don't mind skeptics at all. My father is the biggest skeptic that I know, so I've been raised with it. But for me, a lot of my lectures, I do start a little bit of backstory with me and explaining like, this is who I am, this is why I do what I do. And every time I do this, I share a photograph, a ghost photograph I have of my brother that we captured along with an EVP, and I play it for people. And there have been a few times where people, you can just kind of see the look on their face where they're like, there's something there. And it's something special. It's something that, I can't necessarily just, come up with an excuse of what it could be, solve it right there. So that's always nice and fun to be able to kind of at least cut away a little bit at the armor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to convince anyone, and I'm not here to convince anyone. My paranormal journey is 100% for me, and to kind of prove to myself that my brother is okay and that I'll see him again. If in the process I help other people on their paranormal journeys, awesome. Like that's a dream come true. But I'm not here to convince skeptics to believe, because I can't. So I'm here to have a conversation with you. I'm here to share what I believe and what I think I've caught. You are more than welcome to kind of clink away at my armor as well. And we'll see where we land in the middle. And I think that's always good to have that. I think the people who are 100% in the paranormal corner, and then those 100% in the mundane corner, you can learn a lot from each other. And I think balance is very good. So I'm not opposed to it in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And I appreciate skeptics too. And I agree with you that, just being yourself and sharing your experiences can have an impact on people more than anything else. I still kind of wrestle with, lately I'm more leaning towards what Steiner calls super sensible knowledge, which is occult science versus, kind of rigid science. I'm feeling a little bit let down by the rigid ideas of science. And it's based more on my experiences, my own experiences. And I sometimes wonder, I go in between like wanting everything to be purely scientific in the paranormal or the metaphysics, and then realizing that is not necessarily useful, that these are different ways of viewing reality in some ways. And sometimes they seem to merge and sometimes they don't have to merge.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing is that nobody likes to be preached to. So sharing your experiences or, sharing what you think is great, but not necessarily projecting it on others and being like, well, because I experienced this, you should believe it too. I think that's huge. And I think we can have these conversations without offending one another or becoming offended or becoming very defensive. Again, I think we can constantly be learning from each other and changing our views of how things work. Like you even said, with like the rigid science versus the more metaphysical way of, every so often they do overlap. And that's when you stop and you scratch your head and go like, all right, there's something here. There's something really big here. Let's take a closer look at it. And again, I just think it's important to stay malleable and be willing to absorb when the time is right. There are times where you don't want to necessarily agree with what someone's saying or thinking. There's a lot of red flags out there. But every so often, you stop and you think like, oh, I never thought of it that way before. I'm going to file that away and kind of add it to my patchwork quilts of what makes up my beliefs and my universe surrounding me.
Yeah, I like that. I like the idea of the quilt. It's similar to something I've heard about creating a mandala of your life. And I think listening to you, the reason I've been wrestling more with that is I read Nikola Tesla's little autobiography. And I think he's the first person I've ever read. He had some amazing mystical abilities, which he didn't call it that, but they really are. And he's the first person I know that actually successfully invented things and was a mystic. Like mostly you see, like it was his knowledge, like he had this obsession with the number 369 and his knowledge of these things led to some of the greatest inventions and changed civilization. And I think it really kind of opened my mind to that idea that, oh, maybe they really do go together. He's kind of an example of it.
Yeah. Why not? You know?
So that's when I was listening to that, so that's probably why I think that way right now. I did want to kind of remind people, because you mentioned it earlier, that you are accepting submissions for Volume 4. And how long is that open, the door to the submissions?
So submissions are open until June 1st. So you still have about a month and a half to go. And again, we're looking for things on topics all over the place. Like we mentioned before, botany and astrology and voodoo, tarot, witchcraft, cryptids. We've never had anything on aliens or, extraterrestrial, ultra-terrestrial. So I just throwing that out into the universe. Hauntings, folklore, death culture, dark history, anything weird. We're really looking for it. So I encourage anyone, whether you've been published before or not, whether you consider yourself an investigator or not, we've had some people where they're like, well, I've never been on a paranormal investigation before, to which I say, who cares? Really pick a topic that you're interested in or you're fascinated by, or you've been passionate about for a while, and basically write an essay on it. Try to teach me a lesson on this topic. And we're looking to release Volume 4 around mid-September is the goal as of right now.
And one of the things I like too is there are different lengths of articles. I think is the shortest 500 words. Yeah,
I think we have like our minimum of at least 500 words. So it's not like too short.
Right.
We want you to be able to get into at least a little bit of the details. But it does not have to be pages and pages and pages long. It doesn't have to be 50,000 words. It can be kind of a short and sweet little thing, just to kind of like get your thoughts out there or get your idea out there. So I believe, I have to double check, but I believe it's 500 words to 5,000 words. That's kind of our range that we're looking for.
And is it best to go through your website, spookeats.com?
Yeah, if you go to spookeats.com, we've got it up on our blog area. Also, if you follow us on Facebook, I'm constantly posting about it. If you follow it on Instagram, it's in the link in our bio. So there's a couple of different ways that you can access the submission guidelines.
Yes, and you can also still see where to purchase all 3 volumes of the Feminine Macabre. So if you start with 3 and you love it, then you can go back and buy the other 2.
Yes, exactly. You can start in any order. It does not matter.
No, it doesn't. So we're getting closer to the end of the show. Is there anything particular that you would like to sort of address? Anything you've been thinking about more, or any sort of advice in general, whether it's connected to the Feminine Macabre or the paranormal or your own experience on your own journey, coming who you are? One of the things I just wanted to acknowledge about you is you're a real go-getter, and it shows, it produces results. And even though you probably, I'm sure, have had some dead ends, but that's the one thing I noticed about you right away. And that's so important in any endeavor, to just do it and just go for it.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, like, one thing I've been thinking about a lot lately, this is for anyone that's watching, that I would say a mother, but a parent in general, or even just someone that's kind of overwhelmed. For me, I started Spook Eats when I was much younger. I was not a mother. COVID was not happening. And I was seeing my social media really grow. I was able to go out and experience and do things. And once I had my son, that kind of hit the brakes real fast along with COVID. And I've really been struggling to try to find that balance of being a content creator, an author, and being a mom as well. And somebody asked me this on a show in the past, well, how do you do it? What do you do? And I said, I don't know how I do it. And I think that's okay. There are some days where I am content creating and I'm posting and I'm writing and it's great. But then I realize I'm neglecting my little one. And when I'm really, really focused on my little one, I'm neglecting social media. So I think, anyone that's watching this that's really struggling to find that balance, my biggest advice to you is to be gentle with yourself and to be patient with yourself, and to find those people within the community that are willing to help you and willing to wait for you. That was one of the biggest things that several people within the community said to me when I really started to express this around a year ago, where I feel like I'm being left in the dust while everyone else is continuing to grow within the paranormal. And they said, we will be waiting for you here when you are ready to come back. And that just really rested on my heart. And I've really kind of clung to that over the last year or so. So if anyone is struggling with something similar, be gentle with yourself, be patient with yourself. The paranormal will always be around. The paranormal will always be here. And the Feminine Macabre will always be around. So if, you want to make a submission, maybe you can't make it work for volume 4, there's going to be a volume 5. Be patient with yourself and take your time, and just be good to yourself. And that can mean different things for different people. But I really encourage anyone that is thinking of submitting, you are more than welcome to submit in this window. And if you can't make it work this time around, there is always next time.
Yeah, I love that advice about the waiting, and that's a really interesting thing to say. I think that's very, very good and astute. And there can be sort of a panic, that sets off in us at any age, but that, it's sort of a good advice, and it sort of fits with nature, how nature has periods of rest, and
yes, and
it needs it. And we don't always have to be producing.
Yeah.
To be accepted, though it is a fast world out there.
It is. But you have to remember to slow down every so often.
Yeah, I wonder if the afterlife is affected by social media.
Oh, who knows? Oh gosh! Again, can of worms.
Can of worms. I'm gonna have to think about that. Does that
perhaps
speed them up too?
Volume 4.
So, I also think that it's an interesting dance between producing work and putting it out. At least my own experience is knowing how to balance that in general, is like, how much time should I spend putting things out? And then I need time to create. Mm-hmm. I need to at least separate a little bit. So that's something I think people have always struggled with. At least artists have.
Yeah.
So thank you so much again for coming on the show. We really loved having you, and I love talking to you about all these different topics. It's always fascinating to spend time with you.
Yes, it's always a great conversation here. So thank you for having me back.
Oh, you're most welcome. And thank you all for listening in. Join us next time as we continue to explore the esoteric and the obscure together. Have a great week.